Greetings, lovers of lore. I'm your host, Vicious Venus, and welcome to the newest installment of the Whimsical Whispers podcast. So, usually on our podcast, we talk about lighthearted topics like book reviews, talking about characters, or giving opinions on certain stories. However, today's topic is a little bit more serious. I will be touching on toxic and abusive relationships, and if you are sensitive to those kinds of topics, please click out of this episode and come back next week. Anyway, today I will be doing something a little different. Keep in mind that I'm not directing this video towards any one book or series or TV show or comic. I'm not directing this towards a specific author. However, this episode is directed towards a certain genre in writing, and this genre is romance. Romance isn't my favorite genre, but it does not mean I harbor any negative feelings against it. Out of all genres, romance is the one I consumed the most. Growing up watching Indian movies with romantic subplots, I've seen enough romance to last lifetimes. And in a lot of romance stories that I have seen, there is one certain trope that really bothers me. Today I will be discussing the bad boy, toxic male lead cliché. Because I have a lot of thoughts and opinions on this topic, I will be splitting this episode into different parts. I'm only doing this so that way I can explain the topic in full depth and to give my thoughts in an orderly fashion. Now, let's get into the episode. Part 1. Meet the bad boys. So, in this trope, I find that there are usually two types of characters. Type 1, the edgy boy. The edgy boy can be found not only in romance, but in adventure stories or stories that involve a group of main characters. The edgy boy is typically sarcastic, a little rude, and will often mock the other characters. A great example of this trope is Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Edgy, check. Sarcastic, check. A little sardonic, check. Emotional baggage and trauma, check. Characters like Zuko aren't necessarily bad or toxic. In fact, I find edgy boys to be interesting to study because of their interactions with other characters. If written correctly, they can be used as a tearjerker and can have beautiful character development by opening up to the other characters. The edgy boy usually has a tough exterior but is a huge softie on the inside. Most edgy boys are loved by the entire fandom. Now, type 2, the toxic and abusive male lead. Now, this is the type that I find the most common in romance. Does your romantic male lead have anger, emotional issues that he doesn't take care of but instead relies on the other lead to solve them for him? Does your romantic male lead have possessive tendencies and is often controlling the other lead or gets jealous whenever they hang out with other people? Does your romantic male lead rarely ask for consent and often just does whatever he wants with the other lead and gets called cute or hot because of it? That's not a romantic male lead, that's just an abuser. Sadly, the toxic, abusive male lead is quite popular in the romance genre. This is the trope that I will be focusing on this episode. Now, the toxic, abusive male lead is exactly how it sounds, toxic and abusive. This type of character, unlike the edgy boy, is not wholesome or sweet. Authors who write these kinds of characters try to make them tearjerkers or misunderstood. Although their backstories are typically tragic, their personalities often kill any sympathy I have for them. With edgy boys, you can see that they try to move past the trauma and fix their mistakes. With the help of the other characters, they try their best to become a better person. However, the toxic and abusive male lead isn't like this. In fact, they are often the complete opposite. Part 2. forcing your partner to be your therapist. One major problem I have with the abusive, toxic male lead, which I will shorten to ATML, is that they often don't deal with their own issues. Once the ATML's partner learns about his dark and tragic past, they feel like it's up to them to heal the ATML with the power of their love. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't help people when they are in their darkest times, or that you shouldn't comfort your partner when they are dealing with trauma. You should definitely help them and comfort them in any way that makes them feel comfortable. However, you should never feel that it is your responsibility to heal their trauma. Unfortunately, the main character in these types of romance stories always feels like it's their job to make the ATML a better person. The ATML even encourages this behavior by never solving their own issues and continuing to act violently, all the while crying to the main character about how they're just trying their best to become better. The ATML never tries and is at this point just emotionally manipulating the main character. If you are in a dark place or going through a rough time, I implore you to go to a trusted person and let them know how you feel. There is nothing wrong in seeking help when you really feel down, and it is often the best thing you can do for yourself. However, this isn't what the ATML does. He completely mooches off of the main character's support and love. You see this in movies like After or The Kissing Booth. The ATML just expects the other lead to solve his issues for him, or he demands that the other lead accept his violent ways. Like, he's acting as if it is normal to just run around and beat up people, and he often feels insulted when the other lead just asks them to stop. They act offended, and it's honestly super funny in an uncomfortable and terrible way. And for some reason, this is considered attractive. This is considered super hot. Like, people really need to start discouraging this behavior in romance before it's too late. And sadly, it's been seen so many times. And we really need to stop this before it gets out of hand. Part 3. Cringe, all caps. Now, this is kinda just my personal opinion, but the edgy boy, I have anger issues, I have trauma, kind of men are just really, really cringy. Now, abusive, toxic men in real life are a serious issue, and unfortunately, many people have to deal with these kinds of men on a daily basis, which is so terrible, and I'm very grateful that I am not one of these people. But ATMLs and romance stories are just so cringy. The way they are portrayed as this, I will be your knight in shining armor, but I won't treat you with respect, is so cringe. And the way they try to portray it as romantic is ugh, if you know what I mean. Romance is supposed to be a genre that gives you heartwarming stories about relationships, stories about the beauty of emotions and feelings. This is the basis of romance. And yes, romance can be a little dramatic. Often the two genres can be mixed together. But I often find that there are 3 types of genre. Drama that is almost comical, drama that gets you very invested, and drama that is plain trash and cringe. You know, that type of drama that makes you think, how or why is this even happening? Guess where the ATML falls under? I feel like a perfect example to show why ATMLs are just plain cringe is Edward Cullen from Twilight. I'm not gonna get into why I don't like Twilight because there are hundreds of people who have made videos and posts about why Twilight is garbage, Personally, I would recommend you to check them out because they do often do a good job in explaining why. Now, in my opinion, Edward isn't the worst ATML I have ever seen. He does have his good moments, I guess, and there are some times where I guess he could be redeemable, but there are many times when in the first book he does something weird or creepy or just downright terrifying, and it's portrayed as romantic. This guy watches Bella while she sleeps, and the readers are supposed to take this as romantic. It blows my mind, to be honest. It's also just super weird how they try to make him dangerous and say it's really hot. Yeah, because men who could kill me if they wanted to are just super attractive. I just love hanging around with people who could kill me any second. So, yeah, I hope you guys understand why I think ATMLs are just really weird and cringe, because, to be honest, most of their interactions don't make sense. They're either super dangerous or so weird, and they're often portrayed as romantic, which just really confuses me, so I hope you understand. Part 4. Support from the audience and the author. Now, if these kinds of characters are so damaging and terrible, then why do they exist? Why are they so widely known? Why do they appear so very often in modern romance? Like, when Twilight came out as a movie, people really started to bash on the characters. People really started to take notice to how creepy Edward's behavior was. So why doesn't this happen more often? There are so many ATMLs in the romance genre. So why aren't more of these characters being canceled? The answer is plain and simple. They have a fan base. They have a cult. They have a group of supporters. Keep in mind that there are actual human beings who write these kind of stories, not just some weird little kid who fantasizes about these kinds of relationships, but real adults who write them as manuscripts, and real adults who let these kinds of stories get published and shown to the world. People of all ages, from teenagers to young adults to full-blown adults, they gobble these stories up as if they were starving. Now, I don't want to judge people for reading the stories they want to, but when you are consuming a certain kind of media, whether it's a web novel or a TV show, understand what you are consuming, understand who or what you are supporting, because just buying a book that features an ATML will be letting the author and the publishing company know that you would like to see more of these characters and that they deserve a platform. Which is honestly the sad truth, because by buying these kinds of stories, by consuming them, by supporting them, you are letting these people know that you would like to see more of it. Sadly, many people don't grasp this concept because they don't understand why ATMLs are so bad. They don't understand that they are promoting toxic relationships, that they are promoting men who abuse and manipulate their partners. And not just men, all sorts of characters who are toxic. Now, ATMLs are often the most common toxic characters that I find in the romance genre, but there's all sorts of toxic characters that often are promoted and just never left unchecked, and are never left checked. And to be honest, it's really not their fault. It's really not the audience's fault. It's really not the reader's fault. Throughout history, men have been taught to treat their partners like their property. To them, their partners weren't human. They were kind of like inanimate objects. ATMLs are just a representation of what society expected back in those days. The kind of behavior that we see in an ATML is the kind of behavior we promoted back in the day. And we are still promoting this behavior now because of an ATML. We're still promoting the same toxic behavior. We might not be shoving it down people's throats so often, but by projecting it through a fictional character, we are still promoting it. We are still supporting it. If you look at it this way, how can you say that we have changed at all? How can you say that we have moved past those dark and terrible times? So you might be thinking, why don't we just tell romance writers to stop writing ATMLs? Well, we certainly can try, but I wouldn't expect the best results. You see, there are many reasons as to why an author may not want to stop writing an ATML. Some authors may not see problems with ATMLs and will just continue to write them because, in their perspective, ATMLs aren't problematic. They'll just say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Some authors may not want to stop writing ATMLs because they are afraid of the money they may lose. If their fans like ATMLs and are buying their books because of it, then why would they stop? If they stop, then they might lose all that money. And for some authors, their income is very important. So perhaps the problem might be with the fandom, the audience itself. Fandoms in general are very harsh and so protective of the things they like. Whenever there is a character who tells the main character that the ATML is not good for them, the entire fandom will hate on the character for even suggesting that the ATML is a bad person. The entire fandom will honestly hate anyone who comes in between their ship, regardless if they are a bad person or not. I've seen this happen many, many times. If a character tries to come in between the ATML and the main character, that character will be hated on until they change their opinions and their views. The author doesn't even try to stop this. The author doesn't really make any effort to show that this character isn't wrong for telling the main character to not spend time with the ATML. The author never does anything like this. Usually the author encourages this. Usually the author says, yeah, this character is bad for being against the ATML. The character is bad, you should hate on the character. When in reality, they didn't do anything wrong. And it's honestly very, very problematic because this literally means that you support toxic men over other characters that will treat the main character like a human being. I know I've said in the beginning of this segment that maybe it's not a problem with the audience. And to be honest, it might not even be a problem with the audience. Perhaps this is just a cycle of people making mistakes due to the ignorance that ATMLs are bad characters. The fandom doesn't know that the ATML is a bad character. The author doesn't know, or they don't care. In the end, it's nobody's fault. The entire fandom, author, publishing company, everyone is just making a bunch of mistakes. And by educating people, we might be able to stop this endless cycle of promoting toxic men. Part 5. The aftermath. So, what is the result of all this toxicity? What's gonna happen to the romance community if everyone starts to promote ATMLs? Without discouragement, ATMLs will become something that is normalized in modern romance. I mean, we already see them so much. Some people are trying to stop people from encouraging this kind of behavior, which is why they haven't been normalized already. But we already see this becoming a normalized thing. There are many, many more authors and writers who are writing manuscripts and stories that involve these kinds of characters. It's already becoming a thing, and it's very, very close to becoming normalized. It's just that not everyone supports it yet. We live in a world where many, many people are influenced by the media and other things that they consume. So if ATMLs become a regular thing, what will happen to our societal standards? I mean, our societal standards as of now are really not that great. They are pretty trash. But this kind of behavior becomes normalized, it'll get way, way worse. So, what can you take away from this episode? Well, what you can take away is that we really, really need to start spreading the word. We need to start discouraging people from supporting ATMLs. We really need to start educating ourselves and others on toxic and abusive behavior. We really need to spread the word, because if we don't, this behavior will become normalized. This will become a regular thing, not in just your stories, but in your movies and your TV shows. It'll become everywhere. It's like I say, just because it's fictional doesn't mean it can't become a reality. Thank you for listening to this installment of the Whimsical Whispers podcast. Today was a very interesting topic, and depending on the platform you are on, comment down below about what you feel about this topic. Let us know your thoughts and opinions, because I am very, very intrigued, and I want to know what you guys feel. I want to know your thoughts. I want to know your opinions, because I feel like this is the type of topic we really do need to have a discussion about. Anyway, that'll be all for today. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.